The church bells echoed in the crisp autumn air as Mia Rodriguez stood at the end of the aisle, her hands trembling slightly around the bouquet of white roses. The soft murmur of guests faded into the background as her eyes locked onto Alex, waiting at the altar. His smile was warm, reassuring, everything she needed to see after the roller coaster of emotions they had endured. Mia had dreamed of this moment for as long as she could remember, a moment she thought might never come. As a trans woman, the road to love and acceptance had been difficult, but Alex had been her unwavering rock, standing by her through every struggle. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. As she began her walk down the aisle, Mia could feel the love in the room. Close friends, supportive coworkers, and a few estranged family members, including her brother Jake, watched with mixed emotions. The flickering candlelight bathed the room in a soft glow, but Mia's focus was entirely on Alex. The way he looked at her made her heart skip a beat, a look of pure devotion, as if nothing else in the world mattered. When Mia reached him, Alex gently took her hands, squeezing them with a silent promise. The officiant's voice seemed distant as Mia and Alex exchanged vows, their words filled with tenderness and emotion. "I love you, Mia, for everything you are and everything we'll become together," Alex said, his voice catching slightly. "I promise to protect you, to stand by you, always." Mia's voice trembled as she responded, "I never thought I'd find someone like you, someone who loves me for all that I am. You've given me a new life, and I promise to love you with all of my heart, forever." Tears welled in her eyes as they exchanged rings, the metal cold against her skin. When the officiant finally declared them married, the small crowd erupted into applause. Alex leaned in, his lips brushing against Mia's with a kiss that felt like a seal of destiny. In that moment, Mia was overwhelmed with happiness. She had overcome every barrier, every whispered insult, every rejection from those who didn't understand her. And now, she stood here, in her wedding dress, hand in hand with the man she loved, a bright future stretching out before them. As they walked down the aisle together, guests showered them with rose petals, their laughter and cheers filling the room. Everything felt perfect, like nothing could ever go wrong again. But somewhere, lurking in the shadows just outside the church, someone watched them with cold, calculating eyes. The joy of the day was lost on them. Their fingers twitched with dark intent, waiting for the moment when happiness would be replaced with horror. And for Mia, the dream she had finally lived was about to come to a violent, shattering end. Hours after the ceremony, the sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow over the small, boutique hotel where Mia and Alex had booked their honeymoon suite. The newlyweds had slipped away from the reception early, eager to spend their first night together as husband and wife, wrapped in the privacy and blissful silence of their own world. Alex held Mia's hand as they entered the suite, the door closing with a soft click behind them. The room was perfect, a king-sized bed draped in crisp white linens, a bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket by the window, and the soft hum of jazz playing from a hidden speaker. It was everything they had imagined. "Give me a second," Alex said with a smile, kissing Mia on the forehead. "I left a little surprise for you in the car. I'll be right back." Mia's face lit up with a playful smile. "A surprise? You've already given me the best day of my life." Alex winked as he slipped out the door, leaving Mia alone in the softly lit room. She walked toward the window, taking in the view of the city below, the twinkling lights making her feel as though they were in a bubble of serenity. She couldn't stop smiling. Everything felt so perfect. She walked over to the bed, smoothing the edge of her dress as she sat down. A small sigh escaped her lips. After everything she'd been through, after all the pain, the doubts, the fear, she was finally here. Married, loved, safe. A loud thud came from the hallway. Mia turned her head, her heart skipping a beat. "Alex," she called out, her voice soft but tinged with confusion. Silence. She stood up, a slight chill running down her spine as she walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. Her hand reached for the doorknob, but just as her fingers brushed the cool metal, she hesitated. Something didn't feel right. Another sound, this time closer, like a faint scuffle, followed by the unmistakable creak of the hotel door slowly opening. The door didn't move, just a faint disturbance in the air. Mia's pulse quickened. "Alex?" she repeated, louder now, her voice betraying a hint of fear. No answer. Her stomach tightened, a cold dread creeping through her veins. She turned toward the bed again, her eyes darting around the room, searching for something, anything that could explain the growing sense of unease. And then she heard it, the soft, deliberate sound of footsteps approaching from the hallway. Suddenly, the door burst open, slamming against the wall with a force that made her jump. Before she could scream, a figure rushed at her, fast and aggressive. A hand covered her mouth, stifling her cry for help. She fought back, struggling, her mind racing in terror as she kicked and clawed, trying desperately to break free. But it was no use. Her attacker was too strong, too fast. The struggle lasted only moments, but each second felt like a lifetime. Mia's world spun into chaos as the figure pinned her down, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything went dark. Alex returned to the suite, his heart light, carrying a small velvet box in his hand. He couldn't wait to see the look on Mia's face when she opened it. A pair of diamond earrings, something special to commemorate the start of their new life together. He turned the doorknob with a grin, pushing the door open softly, not wanting to startle her. "Mia, I got—" The words died in his throat. The room was a wreck. The once pristine bed was disheveled, blood splattered across the sheets in sharp contrast to the white fabric. The champagne bottle lay on the floor, shattered glass glinting in the low light. His breath caught in his chest as his eyes moved to the still figure crumpled on the bed. Mia. She wasn't moving. For a split second, his mind refused to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything. He rushed to her side, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch her. Her skin was cold. Too cold. Blood, so much blood, was pooled around her, soaking into the bed, staining the floor. His voice broke as he screamed her name, a raw, desperate sound that seemed to echo through the room. "Mia! No, no, no!" He collapsed beside her, cradling her lifeless body, tears streaming down his face. His mind raced, unable to comprehend the nightmare unfolding before him. Who had done this? Why? He fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers, barely able to get the words out. "My wife? She's someone killed her. Please, you have to come. Please." His world was spinning out of control. The joy of their wedding day shattered into 1,000 pieces. In the background, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. But for Alex, it all seemed so far away. All he could hear was the deafening silence of the room, the silence that Mia would never break again. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the hotel in an eerie glow, a stark contrast to the golden hues of the setting sun that had painted the sky just hours earlier. Police cars lined the street outside the hotel, and yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the evening breeze. Officers moved in and out of the building, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene of the murder. Inside the honeymoon suite, Detective Karen Mitchell stood over Mia's body, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. The room was a mess, a broken champagne bottle, blood smeared across the bed, and Alex sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth in shock, his hands stained with Mia's blood. "Jesus!" muttered Officer Ramirez, one of the first responders, shaking his head as he looked at the scene. This was supposed to be their wedding night. Detective Mitchell nodded, but her face remained expressionless. She'd seen her fair share of crime scenes, but something about this one bothered her. It wasn't just the brutality, it was the timing. A murder right after a wedding? She'd seen enough in her years to know that the killer had to be someone close, someone who knew them. She crouched down beside Alex, her voice low but firm. "Mr. Carter, I need you to try to focus. I know this is hard, but I need to ask you some questions." Alex didn't look up. His eyes were hollow, fixed on the lifeless form of his wife, his hands trembling as he gripped his hair. I don't understand. She was fine. We were so happy. I just want to get a gift for her, and when I came back, she was gone. She's gone." His voice cracked, tears streaming down his face. "Did you see anyone outside your room when you left?" Mitchell pressed. "Anyone acting suspicious?" Alex shook his head frantically. "No, no one. It was so fast. I swear I was only gone for a few minutes. I don't know how. I don't know how this could have happened." Mitchell exchanged a glance with Ramirez, her instincts kicking in. Everything about Alex screamed grief. Real, raw, uncontrollable grief. But she'd been doing this long enough to know that grief didn't always mean innocence. "All right," she said softly, standing up. "I know you're in shock, but we're going to need to take you down to the station to get a full statement. We'll do everything we can to find out who did this. I promise you that." As Alex was led away by another officer, Mitchell turned her attention to the crime scene techs who were combing the room for evidence. "What do we have so far?" she asked. One of the techs, a tall woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, looked up from dusting the doorknob for fingerprints. "No forced entry, so either the door was unlocked or the victim knew the attacker. We found traces of skin and hair under her nails, so it looks like she fought back. We're running the DNA now." Mitchell frowned, her mind racing through the possibilities. A sudden thought struck her. Was this a crime of passion? Had someone close to Mia lost control? Her first instinct was Alex. Spouses were always the prime suspect in cases like this. Maybe he'd snapped in a jealous rage, or maybe there was something about Mia's past that had driven him to kill. But as she scanned the scene again, something about that didn't feel right. Alex had been distraught, yes, but his grief seemed too genuine. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was something else, something darker. She walked toward the bathroom, careful not to disturb any potential evidence, and glanced at the sink. Blood-stained towels were scattered across the counter, as if someone had tried to clean themselves up in a hurry. But the killer hadn't been thorough. Not thorough enough to cover their tracks. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from the lab. DNA results came back. Male profile. Doesn't match the husband. Mitchell's pulse quickened. Someone else had been in the room. Someone they hadn't accounted for yet. "Get forensics on the phone," she said, her voice sharp. "I want every inch of this hotel checked for security footage. Find out who came and went before this happened." As she stepped out into the hallway, she glanced down the long corridor leading to the elevator. Anyone could have slipped in during those few moments when Alex had been gone. A stranger? An acquaintance? Or maybe someone from Mia's past? Her thoughts shifted to the victim, Mia Rodriguez, a trans woman who had overcome so much adversity in her life, now lying dead on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Had this been a hate crime? Had someone from her past come back to haunt her? Mitchell's mind raced with possibilities. There were so many directions this case could go. The DNA evidence opened up a new set of questions, but it also complicated things. Who was the mystery man in Mia's room? And what had really happened in the short window of time when Alex had stepped away? She pulled out her notepad, jotting down potential leads. Mia's family, particularly her estranged brother Jake, had been a source of tension in her life. He had made it clear he didn't accept Mia's transition and had threatened her in the past. And then there was Alex's past. An ex-girlfriend perhaps, or a former friend who harbored dark feelings toward their relationship. But as she pieced together the fragments of the night, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a random act of violence. There was a deeper motive. Someone had wanted Mia dead, and they had taken their opportunity in the cruelest way possible on her wedding night. As the hotel's lobby doors swung open and the cool night air rushed in, Detective Mitchell knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The hunt for Mia's killer had just started, and every detail would matter in uncovering the truth. The morning after the murder, Detective Mitchell sat at her desk, staring at the photos of Mia Rodriguez scattered in front of her. A beaming bride on her wedding day, her eyes filled with hope and love. And now, those same eyes, lifeless and cold in the crime scene photos. Mitchell couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more lurking beneath the surface of this case. Her mind wandered back to the DNA results. Someone else had been in that room. The DNA didn't match Alex. So who was it? She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. She needed to dig deeper into Mia's life. Who had she crossed paths with? Who might have had a motive to end her life in such a brutal, personal way? Pulling up Mia's social media and phone records, Mitchell started to sift through her digital footprint. As she scrolled through endless photos, posts, and messages, a clear pattern emerged. Mia had faced her fair share of hate. In many of the comments on her posts, there were slurs, insults, and threats from faceless accounts, people who despised her simply for who she was. But as Mitchell dove deeper, one name kept resurfacing: Jake Rodriguez, Mia's older brother. Jake had been vocal about his disapproval of Mia's transition from the beginning. Their relationship had become toxic over the years, with Jake refusing to acknowledge Mia's identity. Old text messages between the siblings revealed years of hostility, arguments that spiraled into hateful diatribes, many of which were initiated by Jake. One message, in particular, caught Mitchell's attention, sent just weeks before Mia's wedding. "Jake, I can't believe you're actually going through with this. Marrying some guy like you're something you're not. You're a disgrace to this family, Mia. You've ruined everything." Mitchell's eyes narrowed as she read the message over and over again. The words dripped with venom, and the timing was too close to the murder to be a coincidence. Had Jake finally snapped? Had he followed through on his threats? "Ramirez," Mitchell barked, calling over her partner. "Yeah." Officer Ramirez stepped into the office, looking at her expectantly. "Get me everything we have on Jake Rodriguez," Mitchell ordered. "He's Mia's brother, and I think he's more involved in this than we thought. I want to know where he was the night of the murder." Ramirez nodded and disappeared to gather the information. Mitchell leaned forward again, her mind spinning with possibilities. If Jake had killed Mia, it would be a classic case of hate-fueled rage, the tragic end to years of family turmoil. But just as she was about to settle into that theory, something caught her eye: a private message buried deep in Mia's inbox. It was from a name she didn't recognize: Laura Simmons. The messages were short, terse, but the tone was unmistakably threatening. "Laura, you think you can just take him from me? I know what you are. And so does everyone else. You can't hide behind that wedding dress. Alex deserves better. He deserves someone real." Mitchell's heart skipped a beat. Laura Simmons. Who was she? Quickly searching for information, she discovered that Laura was Alex's ex-girlfriend, a relationship that had ended badly just over a year ago. Laura had not taken the breakup well, and according to some mutual friends, she had been obsessing over Alex ever since. A cold knot of dread twisted in Mitchell's stomach. Could this be more than a simple hate crime? Was this not about Mia's identity, but about jealousy? Obsession? "Detective, you're going to want to see this," Ramirez said, stepping back into the office with a folder in hand. "We've got Jake's alibi. He was in another town the night of the murder, miles away. Witnesses confirmed it." Mitchell blinked, her mind racing. Jake couldn't have done it, but someone else could have. "Laura Simmons," Mitchell muttered to herself, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she searched for any connection between Laura and Mia. Sure enough, there it was, a series of messages from Laura over the last few months, always hostile, always hinting at something dark beneath the surface. Mia had tried to ignore them, but the threats had become increasingly aggressive as the wedding approached. A sinking feeling hit Mitchell. Laura had been obsessed with Alex, and when she found out he was marrying Mia, a trans woman she clearly despised, something inside her must have snapped. She hadn't just lost her ex-boyfriend. In her twisted mind, she had lost him to someone she considered lesser. The jealousy, the anger, it all pointed to Laura. "Get me her address," Mitchell said, her voice steely as she stood up, adrenaline flooding her veins. "We need to pay Laura a visit. Now." Ramirez scrambled to gather the information, and as Mitchell prepared to leave, she felt a gnawing certainty in the pit of her stomach. This wasn't just about hate. This was about possession. Laura hadn't been able to let go of Alex, and in her delusion, she had come to see Mia not just as an obstacle, but as a threat that needed to be eliminated. And now, with the pieces falling into place, Mitchell knew exactly who had been lurking in the shadows on Mia's wedding night. "Let's go," Mitchell said, her voice hard. "We're bringing her in." Detective Mitchell sat in the passenger seat of her unmarked car as it raced through the streets toward Jake Rodriguez's garage. She couldn't shake the unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach. The alibi for Jake seemed solid, but until she ruled him out completely, She couldn't ignore the possibility that he might have had a role in his sister's murder. Pulling up outside the grimy auto repair shop, Mitchell and Ramirez stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at their faces. The garage was still open, the fluorescent lights flickering through the oil-stained windows. Inside, Jake was working on a car, his hands covered in grease, oblivious to the approaching storm. "Jake Rodriguez?" Mitchell called out as she stepped into the garage, the clanking sound of a dropped wrench echoing through the space. Jake looked up, surprised. He wiped his hands on a rag, eyes narrowing as he saw the badges pinned to Mitchell and Ramirez's jackets. "Yeah, what do you want?" "We need to ask you a few questions about your sister Mia," Mitchell said, her voice cold and direct. Jake's face immediately hardened, the mention of Mia drawing a reaction. He straightened, crossing his arms over his chest. "What about her?" "Where were you last night, Jake?" Mitchell asked, moving closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Your sister was murdered." There was a flicker of something in Jake's eyes. Shock, maybe pain. But it was quickly swallowed by a scowl. "I know," he said, his voice clipped. "The police already talked to me. I wasn't there. I was out of town, working on a car in Johnsonville. I told them all this already." "That's true, but we also know about the messages you sent her," Mitchell pressed, pulling out her notepad. "You threatened her, Jake. You made it clear you didn't approve of her marriage to Alex, or her life. That's a strong enough motive for us." Jake's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists at his sides, but he didn't move. "Look, I had my problems with Mia, okay? But that doesn't mean I killed her. We had our differences, yeah. I didn't get why she had to do all that. The wedding, the dress, everything. It wasn't right, but I didn't hurt her." Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "Then why send her those messages? Why keep up the threats if you didn't mean them?" Jake's face twisted with frustration, the tension building. "Because I was pissed. I didn't know how to deal with it, all right? She was my little sister, and all of a sudden, everything changed. But that doesn't mean I wanted her dead." Before Mitchell could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. A message from Ramirez, who had been quietly checking updates from HQ. "Witness saw Jake near the hotel last night. Possible sighting near Mia's room." Mitchell's stomach dropped. Could Jake have lied about his alibi? Was there more to his story than he was letting on? She pocketed the phone and took a step closer, her voice low and sharp. "Someone saw you near the hotel last night, Jake. Care to explain how that happened if you were out of town?" Jake's eyes widened for a split second before narrowing again, his face contorting in anger. "That's bullshit," he snapped, his voice rising. "I wasn't near the hotel. I told you, I wasn't even in the same city." "Then how do you explain the witness?" Mitchell challenged. "How do you explain the timing?" Jake's fists clenched, his face red with frustration. "I don't know. Maybe they're wrong, or maybe someone's trying to pin this on me because they know I didn't like what she was doing with her life. But I didn't kill Mia. I swear to God, I didn't kill her." Mitchell studied his face, searching for any crack in his defiance. He was angry, yes, and clearly had issues with Mia's identity and life choices. But the more he talked, the more Mitchell's gut told her that something was off. His anger didn't feel like the calculated hatred of a killer. It felt like the confused, misplaced frustration of someone who didn't understand but wasn't capable of murder. Still, she had to follow the evidence. "Jake Rodriguez," Mitchell said, her voice firm. "You're under arrest for suspicion of involvement in the murder of Mia Rodriguez." Jake's face blanched as Ramirez stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Wait, what? No, this is insane." Jake struggled as Ramirez cuffed his wrists, but he didn't resist. "You've got the wrong guy. I didn't do anything." "You can explain it down at the station," Mitchell said, watching as Jake was led out of the garage and into the back of the squad car. His protests echoed off the cold, metal walls of the garage, but Mitchell remained silent, her mind racing. Hours later, back at the precinct, Mitchell sat at her desk, staring at the paperwork in front of her. Jake's arrest didn't sit well with her. The witness sighting was shaky, and his alibi had several people backing it up. Something just didn't fit. As she mulled over the details, her phone buzzed again. This time, It wasn't a witness statement or a lab report. It was a message from Alex. Alex, I just got a text from an unknown number. It said, she didn't deserve this. Neither will you. Mitchell's heart skipped a beat. The text wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Whoever had sent it was still out there, still watching, and still dangerous. She immediately called Alex. His voice trembled when he answered. Detective, what's going on? Why would someone send this to me? Mitchell's mind raced as she processed the information. If the real killer was sending messages to Alex, this wasn't over. Jake might have been a red herring all along, a convenient distraction while the real perpetrator remained in the shadows. I need you to send me that message, Alex, Mitchell said, her voice tight with urgency. We're going to trace it. As soon as the call ended, Mitchell felt the weight of the case shift. The arrest of Jake Rodriguez had been a dead end, and now they were back to square one. But this new message, this chilling text, suggested that the killer wasn't done. And it wasn't just Mia who had been targeted. Now, Alex was next. Mitchell stood up, the tension in the air thick around her. She needed to move fast, before this case spiraled into more violence. The real killer was out there, and they had just made their next move. The next morning, Detective Mitchell sat in her office, drumming her fingers on the desk as she stared at her phone. The trace on the cryptic text Alex had forwarded had come up cold. Burner phone, untraceable. Something gnawed at her. Jake hadn't seemed capable of such a brutal crime, and the message was another clue that he wasn't the killer. The answer lay in Mia's life, with someone close to her. Suddenly, it hit her. Laura Simmons, the ex-girlfriend. Mitchell rushed to her desk, pulling up the old text exchanges between Laura and Mia. Laura's hostility, obsession with Alex, and growing jealousy made sense now. She had never let go. Mitchell grabbed her jacket and called for Ramirez. We're going to Laura Simmons' house. Now. At Laura's apartment, the tension was thick. Laura opened the door, eyes wide with surprise. But there was something darker behind her expression, an edge of fear. Detective? Laura said, voice shaky. We need to talk to you about Mia Rodriguez, Mitchell said, watching Laura's reaction closely. Laura invited them in, her movements stiff. The apartment was sparse, almost too clean. Laura, we know about the messages you sent Mia. You had a problem with her relationship with Alex, Mitchell pressed. Laura's breathing quickened. I haven't spoken to Alex in months. As for Mia, I didn't like her, but I would never hurt her, she insisted, standing abruptly. You didn't go to the wedding, but you followed them, didn't you? You couldn't stand seeing them together. You lost control, Mitchell pushed. Laura's composure cracked. Tears welled up as she collapsed onto the couch. I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to leave Alex alone. But she fought back, and I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. Mitchell stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. You didn't just kill her, Laura. You destroyed a life. Mia didn't deserve this. Laura, defeated, whispered, I know. As Laura was led away in handcuffs, Mitchell couldn't shake the weight of the tragedy. Mia hadn't been killed out of hate for who she was, but because of one woman's twisted obsession. Now, it was finally over. Mia could rest in peace. Detective Mitchell sat in her car outside the precinct, watching the rain drizzle down. Laura's confession was supposed to bring closure, but something still didn't fit. The message she didn't deserve this. Neither will you haunted her. Laura hadn't sent it. Someone else had. Someone who knew Mia was dead. Her phone buzzed. It was Alex. Alex, detective, I think someone's following me. Mitchell's heart raced. Where are you, Alex? I'm near my apartment, but I don't want to go home. Stay on the phone. I'm coming to you now, Mitchell said, already speeding toward him. As she drove, Alex's voice crackled through her phone. The car, it's still behind me. Pull into a public place, she instructed. A few minutes later, Mitchell spotted Alex's car pulling into a gas station. She parked nearby and approached cautiously, her hand resting on her gun. Alex sat inside, nervously glancing at the dark sedan across the street. Mitchell nodded at him and approached the sedan. She shouted, Police! Step out of the vehicle. But there was no response. When she yanked open the door, her breath caught. The driver was dead, clutching a phone displaying the message. Neither will you. A second phone on the seat showed the last message sent. It's done. He's next. Mitchell's mind raced. The man had killed himself, but not before planning to murder Alex. And he wasn't working alone. She hurried back to Alex's car. We need to get you out of here now, she said, her voice urgent. As they sped away, Mitchell knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days after the final confrontation blurred for Detective Mitchell. The man found dead in the sedan was Derek Cole, a drifter radicalized online. Derek had targeted Mia and Alex not out of personal hatred, but because of the transphobic rhetoric he had been fed by an anonymous group. He had latched onto Laura's obsession with Alex, and together they plotted to kill Mia. Once Mia was dead, Derek was instructed to eliminate Alex next, but his role ended with his suicide. A week later, Alex stood quietly at Mia's grave, the weight of her absence pressing heavily on him. Fresh flowers adorned the polished stone as Alex whispered words of love, his shoulders trembling. Mitchell stood nearby, silently offering support. Laura was in prison, Derek was dead, but the true orchestrator remained hidden behind online anonymity. Mitchell knew they might never find them. As Alex rose, he thanked Mitchell. I don't want her to just be a victim, he said. She fought her whole life to be who she was, and they took that from her. But I won't let them take away her memory. You will, Mitchell assured him, admiring his determination to honor Mia's life. Driving away from the cemetery, Mitchell reflected on the layers of darkness in this case. Laura's obsession, Derek's prejudice, and the unseen hand fueling the hate. But Mia's life, filled with love, had left its own light. Alex's resolve reminded Mitchell that, even in tragedy, love could endure. That evening, at home, Mitchell poured herself a glass of wine. Cases like this left scars, but she had done her part. As her phone buzzed with a message from Ramirez, dinner next week? We survived. Mitchell smiled faintly and replied, we did. Let's do it. Looking at her keepsakes, she knew Mia's story would stay with her, like all the others. The darkness would always be there, but so would people like her to chase it down. For now, the rain had stopped, and Mitchell could finally rest.